Hello, hello, hello. Come on in and sit down. Hi, I am Nina. I was just realizing I actually never spoke in the plenum at RIPE, which is kind of interesting. I spoke many other places, but that's fine. This is my first. Be nice. Um, Today, I'm going to talk about the RouteViews project. For those of you from the British Isles, you would probably call it RouteViews project, but it is an American based project, so I will be calling it RouteViews. So when I say route, think route if you're from those areas. Oh, here's my clicker. So, and why are we here and why are we talking about this project? Because if you can read all of this text that we put on this slide, this is a very old project that started back in 1995. But it has been around for a very long time, and we must admit it probably also has been forgotten a little bit by some people, and there might be some new folks who don't know about it. So this is why we, first of all, are trying to give it a little bit of a restart, but also going around and telling people about what is it that we do, why are we here, along with the also very brilliant project here in the RIPE region, which is the routing information system that is run by RIPE NCC. And who are we and what do we do and what do we plan to do? So that is going to be the topic for the next 25 minutes. So we started in 1995. We now have around, it says 40, that actually we have now reached 50 collectors worldwide. We put them into internet exchanges and we collect routes. Just as most of you will know that the routing information system do, and some of you with gray hair, just as me, will remember that we also do. We collaborate with KIDA, and we're supported by NFS grants in the US. It is now based at University of Oregon, and it is now operated by the Network Startup Resource Center. It used to be its own project when it started at University of Oregon, but over time, people have retired, and at some point, NSRC was asked to take over and help both with funding, but also with the technical, with running the project and building it out. And that is what we're doing. And they have hired in a new team, which is Hans. Hans is somewhere here in the room. Me, Philip Smith, Owen Conway, so it's some of you might remember, Anton, who is also somewhere in the room, and Philip Bibbs. We are the current sort of base members, but we get support from many other people as well. And we are now trying to sort of move the project along. So what is it that I'm talking about? Well, I mentioned the routing information system, assuming all of you know, but we're going through a little bit of a recap maybe of this morning's BGP tool, BGP training session, but also a little bit about exactly what it is that we do. So basically, it's a tool that allows internet operators to look at the BGP table from different backbones and different viewpoints throughout the world. And we have many use cases we can use that for, and we put them at internet exchanges. It actually turns out, and when I joined the team, I was actually surprised to learn that just how many of the tools that I've been using in my 20 years plus peering coordinator career is based on data from both RouteViews and RIS and other BGP collector. But we have KIDA ASRank, and the BGP reader is a tool that you can use to read our data. Hurricane Electric's BGP tools, Kensec Market Intelligence, BGP monitoring, Catchpoint, BGP-Mon, many of the tools that a lot of us use every day will pull in at some point, somewhere, data from our system along with other parts, other data that they use. And we try to spread the collectors throughout the world. It has been a little bit focused on US and Europe in the beginning, but we are now very actively working on getting more collectors out in the sort of further areas of the internet. They're naming Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. So just to give you a little bit of a recap of the BGP workshop this morning, for those of you who didn't make it. So what can we actually read out of the data when we look into the BGP routing table? I know a lot of people in this room will be very familiar with it, but let's have a look anyway. First of all, we have two different, well, we have two groups of users, I think we can say, of the data. One is the researchers. The researchers are using a lot of the stored data because what I forgot to mention before is that we've been around since 1995. We've been collecting the global routing table since 1995 and stored it, so it's still there. You can go in and you can have a look. So researchers can use this to go back in time and see what happened or how has everything developed or whatever they want to use that data for. We also provide a live stream of BGP updates, which means that you can use the data as well to go what is happening right now in near real time. So this means that we basically have researchers and operators as the two main user groups. So me coming from the peering community, my favorite use case in using RouteViews data before I had access to tools I would have to pay for would be to go and find the data I need to find to do a good peering negotiations. So basically, look at the global table to see who are the upstreams, who are the peers, and who are the customers. And it's all about the AS path. And where do we get a lot of data collected with AS paths to look at is to go to the multi-hop collectors we have. So we have two types of collectors. Those we put on internet exchanges. And then we have a number, I think we're at 8 collectors now at University of Oregon, where we do multi-hop sessions, primarily with operators who do not have a presence at an internet exchange where we are. We do require to have full route views, so we want all of your routes when you peer with the multi-hop collector. I'll talk more about that later. So going to a multi-hop collector, you will go to a collector with a lot of full tables on. So that's a good place to go look and start playing with your BGP regex to figure out how is this ASN you want to analyze connected to anybody else. So here we'll just be looking at the prefixes originated in a particular AS I just randomly picked out on the internet. Let me see if this works. Yes. So we have the regex up here, and we can see the originated routes, and then we can see the next ASN. As we all know, BGP, this is the next hop, or this is the connected ASN to this AS. Here we see that the originating AS is prepending. To me, that is usually a sign that this is a transit connection because we don't really want traffic to flow that way if we can avoid it. So let's put a next ASN in the AS path. And we can also just look at, we see the well-known tier 1s in the AS path, and we know that here we are also looking at transit relationships. So I can note this down in my, what do I want to know about this ASN? The other thing that could be interesting to look at is who are the downstreams? And those are usually easier to just look at the local collector, but they will also usually show up in the multi-hop collector. And here you just use a different regext. Maybe this is a class on regext. Anybody want to have like 3 hours on how we do those? No? Okay. We'll just. So we have it here. This is what the ASN announces, and we want to make sure there's something after as well, another originating, or maybe even longer. So we get the list of customers by looking at the ASNs that show up in this. So that way you get upstreams, you get customers, and you get potential peers. And then you know a little bit more about the network when you go out and you want to talk to them about why they don't want to connect to you. So that was basically that use case. I have one more use case to go through. This is what I call make life easier for your NOC. Because often when you get a call with a routing issue, your NOC will go and maybe look in their own routing tables and try to work out what is going on. And one of the original ideas of starting the RouteViews project was for NOCs to have access to look at how does my routes look from somewhere else on the internet. So here we have an example of somebody is trying to balance traffic between the upstreams, and then for some reason the deaggregation doesn't really work, or when the deaggregated connection goes down, things are black holes, something are not working well, and this is not great. So we start at looking at the covering prefix, and we are paying a lot of attention to the RPKI state. And we see that, oh, the covering prefix is, no, one of the longer prefixes has an invalid RPKI state. Uh-oh, this is not good. And this is, if we look at the shorter prefix, those have valid prefixes. No. Validation states. Oh my God. I am so sorry. I feel like I'm jet lagged because out of solidarity, I got up very early this morning to get here so I could be with my American friends with jet lag and we would feel the same. So apologies for mumbling around. And apologies for actually turning this use case the wrong side around, because the point here is that the longer prefix does not have the right ROA. So we forgot to update that. And this is why our deaggregation scheme is not working. And we can find that information by looking at what's going on one of our collectors. So we'll quickly go over the conclusion because that was wrong. Yeah. Deep breath. Okay. So how do we get all the data? Well, we get the data by peering. So some of you will already be peering with us, but we are peering, and we used to have an open peering policy. So we would peer with everyone and their mother, just they asked us, we would go, yes, peer with us. But just as been the case in the project that is run here by the excellent people at RIPE90, we have found that we need to balance the resources that we have between getting as much data as possible, storing as much data as possible, with the operational cost of both the storage, but also the capacity on the collectors. So we have introduced a routing policy. So we no longer have an open policy, but a more selective policy. So who do we care about peering with, and what do we want to do. So we still want to collect as much as possible about how does the internet look today. And what has happened over the years since the beginning of this project, where you could probably see a lot of how the internet was working and who was connected by who, by peering with the relatively big backbone providers and a selected few of the regional providers. You would get a lot of information about where is the main flows of traffic flowing on the internet. But this is not the case today. As we've talked about, at least in the peering community in over many, many, many years, the internet today is not very hierarchical, but it has become a very flat internet, where a lot of the content has moved to the edge and is served on the edge directly to the consumers. Very short AS passes between the content networks and the consumer networks. So in order to catch that, we really want to peer with a lot of people who have good routing tables, but they might not be a global table, but it might be the regional table, or it might be a local table from an IXP. So we want to make sure that we have capacity to store that routes and to have collectors at the right locations throughout the world to collect that. And this means that we have to free up space on some of the collectors. And that means there are certain networks that we really don't want to peer with anymore. So some of those are what we call hobby networks. And it's a difficult decision to make, because we actually do love people who are doing BGP research, also from their home or from their own little private network that they're building up, or their experimental network, or their student network. But we also find that we have a lot of operational overhead from these networks on our system. We also find that maybe they're not showing the right picture of what the operational internet looks like, where the traffic is actually flowing. So we've decided that those are some of the networks we will say no to when they ask for peering. We still love those people, and their routes will make it into our system through their upstreams or through the people they connect to or they have success in peering with. So they will still be able to do research, and like everybody else, they have access to our data. So we love BGP researchers, but we're not going to peer with every single one of them on Earth. What we also do is that when we want to spend resources on actually having a bilateral BGP session to a network, we would like to see the full view of the internet. We want as much of their routing table as they're able to give us from that location. If they only want to give us their usual peering routes, well, then we will likely see them on a route server, and then we're not interested in also spending time and resources on a bilateral peering. And of course, as a peering coordinator for RouteViews, I will always have the final say. So if somebody is doing very, very interesting stuff, we might just overrule all this and then agree to peer with them anyways, because it's an important information to have into our system. And by the way, if anybody have questions, just go to the mic and wave at me and say, Nina, also if I'm doing something really weird. Yeah. So what are we working on the back end? So first, a little bit, we're using the daemon we're using, the BGP daemon is FRR. And I think we have everybody updated to version 10 now, except for the legacy Cisco that still uses Quagga. Another project we have is that we want to get away from actually installing hardware at physical locations throughout the world, and just instead of asking for space and power, we would be asking, hey, can you give us a VM or something similar? Or we've also been talking about where we put hardware out, we will create VMs and maybe offer VMs to other people as well. We are constantly building out, not very fast, but we do feel we are not quite yet where we need to be. And we have a prioritized list of internet exchanges or internet hubs where we want to be. Those includes more locations in Asia, more locations in Africa, also more locations in Europe and South America. Recently, we have added Romania and Italy and Yohobaru. So we are still slowly working on moving on. Oh, I'm getting orange. Another thing which is important that we're working on is that pretty soon we're going to launch Looking Glass. So instead of logging in on the collectors, which is the most common way of looking at the data today, if you're not downloading a whole bunch of data, you can go and use Telnet. You all remember that protocol? Yeah. So you can use Telnet and log into the collector and then just use your usual BGP routing command. We want to get away from that because people are also, some of our users are using it programmatically. So we have scripts that are constantly logging into the servers and doing BGP commands, and that is actually putting a strain on the servers. So we will do two things. One is launch a Looking Glass front that will still give you access to the individual collectors, but through a Looking Glass front. And the second one is get people who are programmatically pulling data from the collectors, moving over to the API instead, like everybody else is doing in this industry. So we want to do that too. There's a beta version of the API, but eventually it will be having all of the collectors available. And then eventually we will turn down Telnet access, except for a few collectors where we will still remain to have that, just for fun. All right. Otherwise, we're working on just updating our hardware and the storage and our infrastructure because some of it has been around for a long time, so it needs a revamp. And we're working on making life easier for ourselves, just like everybody else, by automating peering configuration, automating managing the whole infrastructure, so we can keep doing that for a growing number of collectors and still remain a small team, just like everybody else in the industry. And at the same time, we have a couple of people also working with FRR, testing it, making sure report bugs back, and making sure that it develops to become a good and stable BGP routing daemon. All right. And I am reaching the end, I can see. So what we want to do in the future, again, is more collectors, scale our archiving, maybe diversify locations, and make sure that we talk to the community and to the users, which means people in this room who will use or are using our data, and learning what do you want us to do to make sure that we keep supporting the internet community as we have done since 1995. We're also very, very happy for the people who support us. I talked about that we were supported by NFS grants in the US, that along with a number of private and public sponsors as well, and we say thank you very much. And we really, really appreciate any kind of support. Other ways of supporting is help us host collectors throughout the world at internet exchanges. And of course, for you who have interesting routing tables that we want to look at us, come talk to me about peering. And that was it from me. And I can now take questions.
Very much. Do we have any questions? Do we have any people who suddenly want to volunteer to be hosts?
Otherwise, I need a poll. Who knew about RouteViews before this talk? Who likes RouteViews? Preaching for the choir. Thank you so much for having me anyways.
So, no questions? Okay, Nina, thank you very much.
Thank you.